to NetSuite's Venture Capital Team seminar here on your guide to venture capital funding. This is a follow-up to the ebook that we recently published on how to get VC funding. And certainly if you haven't already received it, we can make sure that you get a copy of it following this webinar. Before we get going, I'd like to take you a little bit through, obviously, a safe harbor statement. The following is intended to outline our general product direction. It is intended for information purposes only. It may not be incorporated into any contract. It is not a commitment to deliver any material, code, or functionality, and should not be relied upon in making purchase decisions. The development, release, timing, and pricing of any features or functionality described for Oracle's products may change and remains at the sole discretion of Oracle Corporation. I'll spare reading the last of it. Basically, this webinar is intended for general information purposes only, and of course, don't make any investment decisions based on what I may say here today. Thank you. Hi, so first some brief introductions here. My name is Reynolds Morgan, and I help lead the venture capital practice here on the West Coast. I'm based in Oracle NetSuite's headquarters here in beautiful Redwood Shores, California. By way of background, I've been in the enterprise business development space for some 20 plus years now. I've got pretty extensive experience in building strategic partnerships, ecosystem, channel alliances, and I've had a focus, obviously, on venture capital, private equity, accelerators, and venture-backed emerging growth, technology, and life sciences companies. Prior to joining NetSuite, I was a director at Finance, an outsourced HR company, where I co-led their venture capital alliance team. So I'm pleased to be here with you today, and look forward to meeting some of you offline. Please note that we're going to have, at the end of this webinar, there's going to be a Q&A section where you can type your questions into a question submission box. We will be replying to those directly via email immediately following the webinar. So please encourage any and all questions, and please don't hesitate to ping us, and we will definitely get in touch on a one-to-one basis after this webinar. Thank you for that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit at a high level of the program agenda. The first part is getting started. We're also going to talk a little bit about your pitch deck and presentation when you do get inside the door at a venture capitalist and you're ready to give them the pitch. We're going to talk a little bit about how to find the right VC firm. Obviously, there's right now in the Bay Area, even the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area alone, there's some 1,700 firms and funds, so lots of choices for you as an entrepreneur to consider. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but creating a very targeted but also broad list, I think, is going to be very key. We'll go very briefly into anatomy of a term sheet, something you need to know, some of the do's and don'ts. And then we're going to wrap up closing the deal. Again, I'd like to be very clear, this webinar is not the be-all and end-all. We're really just taking some of the snippets from the ebook that we published, which is pretty extensive. So these are really just some 30,000-foot view, some of the kind of key things you folks need to consider as entrepreneurs. All right, let's let us get started here. I think it's important to talk very briefly about where venture capital firms get their money. The slide is, I think, pretty good here because it talks about sort of the two main sources of funding that VCs have. So effectively, venture capital is funded by institutional and private investors. Venture capital firms often acquire funds from institutional investors such as pension funds, university endowments and financial firms, or they tap into high net worth individuals like former entrepreneurs or angel investors. Venture capitalists then invest these funds in companies with hopes of achieving a significant return. The venture capital investments are typically made in exchange for equity stake or part ownership in a company, as opposed to being structured as a loan. So again, two sources: institutional investors and certainly private investors. And a term you will hear bandied about a lot is LPs, which of course equals limited partners. Okay, so let's talk about who typically receives venture capital funding. This graph here takes a look at all the deals across the United States and funding by the top 5 sectors. Obviously, internet gets a ton of investment, healthcare, mobile and telecom, software, and others, etc. A large portion of VC funding obviously is directed at specific industries, such as the ones we just highlighted here. But certainly that doesn't mean you, as an entrepreneur, should abandon ship if your company doesn't necessarily, fit into one of those slots. You can still get venture capital funding. However, it's very important to know what you're going to be going up against. Tangible progress at your company will go a very long way in establishing trust and interest from the VC community. Things they're going to want to know is your product different from any other on the market? Does it serve a unique need within a large, untapped customer segment? Can your business model scale? Are you growing larger to support an increased load, be it in customers, transactions, or revenue? At the end of the day, it's all about growth and revenue. Other things they're going to be looking at, and you should need to consider too, is your management team uniquely positioned to understand the customer pinch point, and are you capable of spurring company growth? Have your founders secured funding and worked with the VC community before at other startups? As an entrepreneur, if you've answered yes to each of these questions, then it's pretty likely your company is going to be attractive to venture capitalists for potential funding. Okay, so let's talk about sort of the 5 kind of the key pillars or components that are needed to secure VC funding. Obviously, it all starts with the very first the big idea, your product. How baked is the idea? Do you have a plan of attack? Where are you in your company's growth, et cetera, et cetera? But it all comes down to your idea, the product. What is the pain point that you're solving, and what is the market opportunity for growth? Part of that, you're also going to need a pitch deck. We'll talk a little bit more about pitch deck as we get into this webinar, but certainly that's a very key tool that you folks will need to have in your quiver. There's a lot of discussion online about VC pitch decks. VCs receive oftentimes hundreds of pitch decks a week, just thrown over the fence via cold email, and they also receive many hundreds a month via warm introduction. So you're competing for attention here, especially if you don't have a warm introduction into that VC. And as we'll talk about later, obviously these need to be very, very tight. Also a suggestion that you may want to hire a consultant. There's a whole ecosystem of folks who are now working on VC presentation pitch decks. It can be costly, anywhere from $20,000 to $30,000, but something you may want to consider. We'll also talk about a little bit about when you actually get a meeting with the VC. That's a huge hurdle that you've crossed, but obviously a very, very important step. And then as you go along through the process, if things are tracking well, and you've got some potential interest from some investors, we'll talk a little bit about due diligence, how to properly prepare for that, and obviously go over some of the terms, the things that you're gonna see when you get to a term sheet. Okay, so let's talk a little bit briefly about the pitch deck and presentation. A pitch deck is a presentation that provides an overview of your business. The deck can and should share insights about your product or service, the business model, the market opportunity, the company funding that you're seeking, who your management team is, who the founders are. If you're looking to raise money from a VC, again, a very, very solid pitch deck will be your calling card. And it's effectively the starting part almost, any conversation in introductory meetings. In my opinion, I've seen several thousands of pitch decks over the years. A winning pitch deck is brief, clear, and again, they've got to cover some of the standard information, who your founding team is, what's the pain point here. And this has to be very, very simple in lay terms. If you're building the world's best mousetrap, say it, don't dance around it. How are you going to get there? Where you are in the company's progress, how many people you have now, are you doing any sales or revenue? If so, what are those numbers? Obviously, how much money how much capital are you looking to raise? And as importantly, what are you going to do with that? If you're seeking, say, a $800,000 or $1 million seed round, where is that money going to go? How are you going to leverage it? Is that going to invest more in product, hire more staff, et cetera, et cetera? So it must be very, very clear. Obviously, you're gonna have a slide or two in there about your financials, your P&L statements. From soup to nuts. Where are you? What have you spent? Where are you now? How have you funded the company to date? Was it through friends and family? Were you bootstrapping it, etc.? And you have to have both a clear long-term vision for a company, but also, I think, short-term. Where do you see yourself 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now? And lastly, and most importantly, be prepared to demo the product. It's funny, I think this is one part that entrepreneurs often don't think about because they get so wrapped up in trying to put together the perfect pitch deck. It's funny, I was on Twitter last week, and there's a very well-known VC and entrepreneur, David Sachs. He's from Craft Ventures. He's had multiple big exits. He was an early angel investor in Facebook, Yammer, Palantir, Uber, etc. So he really knows his stuff, and he says, first thing you should do is just show us the product. And we want to see that. We want to see the product. Want to see the demo. Sometimes that will happen. You go in for your pitch. You go in for your meeting, and you're all ready to rip through a pitch deck. And they'll say, "Hey, I've got the deck. What I really want to see is the product." So be prepared to demo the product. And again, like your pitch deck, it needs to be very, very high level. Keep it to 20 minutes or less, so that you capture their attention. Back to some sort of nuts and bolts about the VC presentation itself. Something that's called the 10-20-30 rule. This rule isn't an exact science. A very noted Silicon Valley entrepreneur and investor and former longtime Apple evangelist, Guy Kawasaki, has seen so many pitches over his lifetime, and his thing boils down to this. He said, you need to keep this to 10 slides or less in the deck. You need to be able to present this in 20 minutes or less. And your deck should be easy to read. 30-point font. Try not to put up slides that are difficult to read or too much data crammed into it. And again, this comes back to the point. This is going to take some work to and time to get this boiled down into a very crisp and sharp presentation. I think it's important here to also talk about when your executive is making that presentation to the VC. I guess you can almost consider it like a job interview in that you may have a great product, a great presentation, but how you as an entrepreneur present yourself to that VC is hugely important. Because at the end of the day, when venture capitalists are making an investment in a potential company, they're investing in a big idea, they're investing in the product, but they're very much investing in the team and in the founders who are going to lead the charge here. So these first impressions are crucially important. So when you're speaking, be calm and articulate, have a very, very focused vision. You have to be assertive, of course, and be confident of your idea and where your company is headed. And most importantly, you have to be honest. Oftentimes, entrepreneurs make a mistake of overblowing a market potential or getting caught up in hyperbole. And let's face it, they're excited. This is their baby, and everyone's baby is the most beautiful baby in the world. But you have to be, very straightforward, direct. No fluff, and certainly no BS, because they will see right through that. And if there are any, if they have, be prepared to answer some hard questions, because they will certainly have those, and be prepared to answer them honestly. We've included a link for you to go that kind of shows you some example pitch decks. I think there's some really good ones in here, and there's 30 that we've made available for you folks to take a look at. Aaron Lee, who's a co-founder of an online retailer company called Lenny's, he put together 30 of the best pitch decks. He posted this in an article he did for Pick2Chart. As you go through these decks, you'll notice that they each have a very distinct style, yet also share many similar characteristics. Some of the most common deck tactics are, hooking your audience, again, describing your business in simple languages that truly engages your investor. Show them the problem and what is the solution. Paint a picture of the market pinch point, and again, how is your company going to solve it? If you have a competitive advantage, let the investors know. Highlight the team. This is, again, critically important. If you're lucky enough to have a seasoned management team, show them that. Especially if you have folks who have worked at other successful startups, and as the term is, repeat entrepreneurs. That is something that venture capitalists like to see. They want to meet with folks who have been there, done that before. Hit them with the numbers. If you've got some key metrics that show your business growth and where you're tracking, either in terms of engagement, traffic, or revenue, put that front and center. That is critically important. Okay, let's talk a little bit about how to find the right VC firm as a potential partner. Okay, you look at this map that we put up here about where a lot of the leading VC firms are located. Obviously, the big chunk is here in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley used to be sort of in the South Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, but now it's effectively the entire Bay Area, from San Francisco down to St. Hill Road. Collectively, there's some, almost 40 billion in funding that's coming out of the Bay Area market. Los Angeles certainly has a burgeoning VC scene with some 5 billion in funds. And of course, you look at the Eastern Corridor between New York and Boston, with another 21 billion in funding. There are a number of firms out there, several, as I said earlier, gosh, just in the Bay Area alone, more than 1,700. So it's critical for you to put together a very wide hit list, if you will, or target list of folks you're going to approach. You will be receiving a lot of rejection. A lot of folks may not respond. I think there's a good rule of thumb. You may want to start with a target list of about 100 potential venture capital firms. Okay, now this is probably one of the most more critical steps. It's how to get your foot in the door. So you put together your target list of VC firms, folks that may be a stretch, folks you think would be a really great fit. You've done your research on whom to reach out to there. Like anything else, the very, very best way to get into a venture firm is to leverage your existing network. Use your references. A warm intro goes a long, long way to getting that door opened a little bit. Of course, you can obviously send a cold email, and there are examples of where a well-written cold email and a deck actually got a meeting and got a company funded, but these are, again, very, very rare. In general, cold emails do not work. The VCs have very, very strong filters on their email. I was at a discussion, a venture capital discussion last December down in Los Angeles, and one of the VCs from a very, very prominent tier A venture capital firm took a question from the audience. And there's an entrepreneur in the audience that said, geez, I've emailed so-and-so at your team several times, and we even got an introduction from one of your banking partners, and we received zero response. How do what are we doing wrong here? And the VC person who was on the panel said, first she apologized. She says, gosh, we'll take this offline. I'll see if I can help you here, get you in the door. But she said, you have to understand, and she was speaking in front of an audience of about 75 entrepreneurs who all were looking to raise capital. And she said, you have to understand, if you're emailing a partner at a well-known VC firm, we generally receive about 5 emails a minute. That's pretty staggering. So you do the math on that. That's a lot of just emails are coming in every day. And they simply can't respond to all of them. They often leverage their executive assistants to put screens on those emails too. So again, cracking that wall via cold email is tough. Warm intros are definitely the best. You can certainly attach a pitch deck, but best case scenario is to really get someone that you know and trust to try and get you in the door. And again, this just takes a lot of time, a lot of work. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a term sheet. You've met with your investors, and this is all great news. You've had some successful meetings. You have a willing investor or two, or hopefully more, who's prepared to fund your idea. And so the very next step in this process is reviewing the term sheet from the VC firm itself. When you look at a term sheet, there are effectively 3 main sections. The funding, how much money they're going to be sending to you, corporate governance section, and then, of course, liquidation and exit. These are 3 very, very critical parts. Under funding, the funding section effectively lays out the financial guidelines of the proposed investment. It outlines how much money the VC firm is offering to invest in your company, and as importantly, what it wants from your company in return, specifically some type of security and protection of that security. The corporate governance section of the term sheet outlines the governing structure for the organization. Its main purpose is really to define, the distribution of power, if you will, between the company founders and its investors as it relates to company decisions. This is very important. And then, of course, finally, there's a liquidation and exit section of a term sheet. And this describes what will happen to investors and shareholders if your company is liquidated, dissolved, sold, acquired by another company. It defines who gets paid first, and highlights any particular preference given to the investors. My father, who is a seasoned entrepreneur, and has raised capital for a couple of different companies that were then successfully sold to larger public companies, told me many moons ago. He said, when you're going through this process working with the VCs, and you're talking about the terms of your potential marriage, he said that is also the time when you need to discuss and agree to the terms of the divorce. And I often thought about that, and it's critically important, and it's something that sometimes entrepreneurs overlook because they're so eager to get the funding. But you have to take a hard look and say, okay, a year down the line, someone tries to buy us, then what happens? Because Silicon Valley is certainly ripe with stories of founders who perhaps did not have as successful as an exit as they initially anticipated when they secured the funding in the first place. Okay, let's talk about the desires from you, the entrepreneur, as the founder versus the investor. And this comes back to the term sheet. Term sheet, the way I see it, is effectively a tug-of-war between the entrepreneur, the company founders, and the potential VC investors. The founders are obviously looking to get the very best deal that they can, and hopefully maintain as much control of their company as they can. VCs, on the other hand, want to get in at the very best price that they can and set favorable investment terms for an exit. As you've gone through the process with your VC, I think this one, having a good relationship with your potential investor is very important. The trust just has to be there. But hopefully, as you get to this point, any bumps in the road have already been ironed out. So while the term sheet aims to lay out the terms that benefit both parties, obviously this can be a challenging time when the entrepreneurs and the investors have different desires that don't perhaps line up accordingly. So when negotiating a term sheet, you very much need to consider not only your own wants, but think about from the investor, and how can you folks meet in the middle and come to agreement. Again, the founder wants to get the very best deal they can while maintaining as much control over the company. They want to protect the interests of the founding team members and make sure that those early team members are rewarded for their hard work getting the company off the ground. And of course, the VC or the investment wants the very best return for their investment, and they're going to try to set terms that are favorable for an exit. A note here on lawyers. A lawyer is absolutely crucial as you're going through the term sheet process. Your company likely already has one if it's mature enough to preserve VC funding. A friend of ours, Mark Mullen, who's co-founder of Bonfire Ventures down in Los Angeles, he's got some very sage advice, and he says, a good lawyer will help you set up the company properly so it's prepared to take investment now and in the future. And then, you and the VC negotiate that deal. Then the two lawyers, yours and the VC's, will put the paperwork together with feedback from you and the VC. A good lawyer should also be able to guide you through the documentation phase after a term sheet is signed. If you don't have a lawyer, both Mullen's recommendation and ours at NetSuite is that you find one. There are many sources for that. Again, I first and foremost, I talk within your network. Talk to other entrepreneurs, other folks you trust, other folks who raise money. It's a very small world, and certainly if you can connect with a legal team that someone has used, someone in your network has used before, and you trust them, that's great. You can also, of course, go through discussion boards, check out Y Combinator, etc. Y Combinator is a pretty well-known accelerator in San Francisco, and they've got a lot of great advice there. In venture capital heavy cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, there are firms that specialize in early stage company formation. Type of legal counsel is relatively inexpensive to the payoff for your company, so definitely make sure that you have legal counsel as you go through this process. We've got a slide here from the co-founder of Oxient, Chris Gladwin. Oxient is a company that was founded by some talent behind a very large software exit in Chicago's history. Oxient is going strong, and they're a big data software company. Chris Gladwin, a seasoned entrepreneur, has been through some, 40 rounds of funding with multiple companies in his past. He's got some key points there. He says, a hot company, and if you've gone through this process and you're getting some attention, will receive multiple term sheets at once. That is such an exciting thing, and really a perfect scenario, because then you can make a very informed decision. And then as a part of that, obviously, assuming you have multiple offers, choosing the right VC is really as crucial as the deal terms. There may be times where one firm offers you perhaps better or more preferred terms over another firm, but you may not have the relationship, or your instinct tells you perhaps that's not as best a fit. These are things you need to really consider, because again, it's like you're going through the dating process, and you're ultimately going to get married to someone. You have to think hard and true. If I do this deal with this investor, how are we going to work together? How are we going to partner? What are they bringing to the table? How can they help my growth, et cetera, et cetera? And are we all in alignment? If you can get to those answers, that's a terrific thing. And again, leverage advice from your network. Talk to other professionals and entrepreneurs who have gone through the fundraising process. As you're doing your references and introductions and whatnot, find out what they liked and what they didn't like. Really, really important. Do your homework and talk to folks in your network. Okay, and this is the fun part. Let's talk a little about closing the deal. So let's talk about some due diligence. You're getting near the end of the road. It looks like you've discussed terms. The check has not been written yet, but certainly this, again, back when we talked earlier about the legal team, this is when the VC's legal team will start doing their due diligence. The definition of due diligence is pretty simple. It's the duty of the investor to gather all the necessary information on the actual potential risks involved in an investment. So they need to cover their bases and do their homework, because they do not want to get burned. The VC's legal team will reach out to you about your company's financials. They're going to want to see outstanding contracts and agreements. They're definitely going to want to see the employees and management cap table, and also your intellectual property. There is no standard length of time for the legal due diligence phase. It can go pretty quickly, as quick as a couple of weeks, if the deal is pretty simple and all parties are aligned, to many, many months to complete. This is that's also quite the norm. So I think as you go through this process, just be prepared that it could stretch out for several months. Okay, let's talk about how to prepare for the due diligence. I think it's important here that you need to define one of the senior team members to really be the one to spearhead the due diligence paperwork. There's several checklists as you get to that stage that you can find online in terms of what is required. But again, work exactly with your investor, your legal team, their legal team. It's very important to confirm what exactly they are requesting, and be prepared. They may come back with additional stuff after you've already fulfilled the initial request on their end. But have that conversation, certainly put together a due diligence binder, and have someone truly spearhead that whole project so they can be in charge of it. Let's talk a little bit about why sometimes deals fall apart. As we said about the due diligence, and even on the initial meetings, you have to disclose everything, good, bad, and indifferent. You need to be honest. You need to be upfront. If you try to hide something, say you had a termination of an employee, or some unsavory incident, or maybe some PR issue, or some customer feedback on a product launch that went wrong, whatever, you have to disclose all that. When deals fall apart, it's because either there's inaccurate information, perhaps misleading information. Legal issues come up. Certainly, as you started the process, say perhaps 5 months earlier, and you'd made certain assumptions or predictions about your sales and marketing projections. 5 months down the road, as you're getting close to for them signing the check, perhaps things have taken a turn in another direction. So that is a red flag. We talked about earlier about reference checks. Sometimes the reference don't always come back as positive. So that's another reason sometimes things fall apart. And also, and this happens fairly frequently, conflicts of interest. There may be a conflict with the investor and another portfolio company that may arise. That happens. And also, sometimes deals fall apart because neither of you can agree on the terms. So some final points to consider as you're going through the venture capital fundraising process. Don't get discouraged. I think you need to be prepared for a lot of rejection. We talked about earlier, you target a list of, say, 100 VC firms. You may get, more than half of them not even respond to you. Again, you just have to be persistent. Try your best to leverage that network and get in there. Raising money takes time, and it takes a lot of commitment. It's not something you can do sort of part-time on the side. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur, and you're working incredible hours just trying to raise and grow your company. This is just something else that's being thrown on your plate. You need to be in it for the long haul. Something else I think is also critical. Be prepared to pivot as you go through the process for both sides. The VC may suddenly decide that they feel your company will be better, going in this slightly similar but different product direction. This happens a lot in Silicon Valley. There was a very well-known automated pizza company that had received a lot of venture funding over the last couple of years. They were effectively delivering, having robots make pizzas and then baking them in a van, and as they were being delivered to your home or office. A lot of money went in this company, but at the end of the day, the VCs decided to sort of, the market was not necessarily, selling and making pizzas in a van on the way to offices, but they realized they had some technology that could be leveraged into other industries. So the company recently announced that they're making a big pivot. They've restructured the company, of course, but they're still keeping the business, and the VCs now have an opportunity to chase. So again, as an entrepreneur, do not be surprised if your investors come up and say, hey, we really think you might want to look at taking it this way. And if you don't, in the first go around trying to raise money, and again, this is a fairly common tale, if you're not getting the interest or perhaps the terms that you wanted, look at other alternative funding options. Friends and family, perhaps take a business loan. Perhaps you've got some savings, you can bootstrap it yourself. There are other ways to get funding here. Angel funding, of course, is another one as well. So there is money out there. You just got to be creative and again, put the time in to secure it. Well, that kind of wraps it up here. Just want to tell you a little bit. We've got a venture capital and private equity practice here at NetSuite. We have a dedicated team all across the United States as well as in Europe. We're here as a point of contact for you as the entrepreneur, and we also work very, very closely with our VC and private equity network. So if you have any questions or perhaps you wanted to speak offline, I'm pleased to set up a time to chat with you and connect you with other members of our team. We can love to meet in person as well. But and there's also a chance here, obviously, we can leverage our existing networks and can certainly introduce you to some of our venture partners if I see there may be a fit there. Okay, that wraps it up for today. Again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, the way we're going to handle